Welcome to this deep dive. Today we're going to be exploring the wisdom and philosophy of the Yoga Vasistha.
Yeah.
It's an ancient Hindu text, and we're going to be using a couple of excerpts from books by Swami Venkatasananda as our guides for this journey.
Yeah, his work on this is really fantastic.
Yeah, and so I think, the Yoga Vasistha, it's a pretty complex work.
Oh, absolutely. It's
Yeah.
incredibly daunting for a lot of people to even approach.
Right.
So,
So we're really going to try to just distill it down to
Yeah.
some of the key teachings and stories, and specifically ones that will hopefully spark your curiosity and encourage you to explore it further.
I think that's the best way to approach this text.
Yeah.
You can't get it all at once.
Right.
You just need those little seeds of intrigue, and then
Yeah.
off you go.
Okay, so let's start with one of the most, I think, fundamental concepts that kind of underpins everything in the Yoga Vasistha, and that's this idea of the nature of reality and the concept of Maya. Now, I've heard that word Maya before,
Yeah,
and I think it has something to do with illusion, but
that's it. That's it, in a nutshell. Maya is essentially the veil that obscures the true nature of reality.
okay.
The Yoga Vasistha really emphasizes over and over again that the world we perceive with all its joys and sorrows and everything in between
Right.
is not the ultimate reality. It's not the truth with a capital T.
Oh, so it's like everything we're experiencing is all just kind of a trick of the mind in a way?
In a way, yes.
Yeah.
It's like, you know how sometimes you get so attached to things
Uh-huh.
that ultimately don't really matter? That's Maya at work.
Okay.
Right
Are
there.
there any examples in these texts that illustrate this? Because I mean, that's a pretty big.
Oh, tons of examples, and they're so powerful. So to help us grasp this concept, the Yoga Vasistha uses all these really vivid analogies.
Okay.
It describes the world as a dream.
Okay.
It describes it as a mirage in the desert,
Uh-huh.
or even like a really elaborate empire that's been painted on a canvas.
Wow.
And all of these images are pointing to this idea of impermanence
Okay.
and the fact that our experiences are ultimately illusory.
Okay, so I can see how those analogies work. Like you get so caught up in the dream that you forget it's not real, or you think you're seeing water in the desert, but it's really just the heat, playing tricks on you.
Yeah.
Are there any like more concrete examples in these texts?
There's a really great story in the Yoga Vasistha about a Brahmana named Gotti.
Mhm.
And this guy, he's exhausted after a long journey and decides to take a bath in a river.
Okay.
And while he's in the water, he has this incredibly vivid vision
Okay.
of an entire lifetime. He gets married, he has children, experiences all the ups and downs.
All this while he's taking a bath.
Yes.
Wow.
And then just like the vision ends and Gotti finds himself back in the river, just totally bewildered and questioning like what was real and what was just his imagination.
Wow. So that makes you kind of wonder how much of what we perceive as real is actually just shaped by our own mental state, or our expectations or.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that leads us perfectly into another central theme that we find in the Yoga Vasistha,
Okay.
and that is the power of the mind. This text places a huge emphasis on the mind as the creator of our experiences.
Mm.
Now, it's not saying that the external world doesn't exist, but it's really emphasizing that our thoughts, our desires, our attachments, all of that shapes how we see the world.
Okay.
And ultimately, that can lead to a lot of suffering.
So we're not just passively, having things happen to us. We're actively creating our experiences.
Exactly.
With our minds.
Precisely. And that's where the idea of mental conditioning or Vasanas comes in.
Okay.
These are basically deeply ingrained patterns of thought and behavior
Okay.
that influence how we see the world and react to the world.
Okay. So it's like if you have a recurring negative pattern in your life,
Exactly.
could it be because of a Vasana
It might be.
that's driving it?
The first step is becoming aware of it,
Right.
and then you can start to work on how to break free.
Okay. Vasanas, that sounds like a whole concept worth exploring.
Big time.
But I'm a little lost here. So if our minds are so powerful, are we just doomed to be puppets of these Vasanas?
Not at all. The Yoga Vasistha offers a ton of different strategies for understanding and working with these mental patterns.
Yep.
But before we jump into all of that, let's look at another example that illustrates the power of Vasanas.
Okay, hit me with another story.
All right, so there's this story about Sucra.
Okay.
He was a sage, and in his very first embodiment, his mind was completely unburdened by past experiences.
Wow.
So pure that simply wishing to ascend to heaven was enough to make it happen.
So the strength of his intention alone propelled him to heaven.
It did. His pure intention, unobstructed by any negative vasanas, had incredible power.
Wow, that's incredible. But what about when Vasanas lead to less desirable outcomes?
Oh, there are plenty of those.
Are there any examples of that?
Oh, yeah. Tons.
Uh,
Take the story of King Vipassana, for instance.
Okay.
So this king's consciousness actually manifests as 4 distinct individuals.
Wait, so one king becomes 4 people?
Yes. And each of them experiences very different fates
Okay.
because of the varying density of their vasanas.
Oh, wow.
So one of them achieves liberation, transcends the cycle of birth and death.
Good for him.
Another one, driven by this desire to see the universe, ends up on this mythical mountain range,
Oh.
witnessing countless worlds.
What about the other 2?
The third Vipasit falls prey to his desires and is reborn as a deer.
Oh.
And the fourth one gets trapped in a whole web of suffering
Oh, no.
and eventually perishes.
No. Okay, that's quite a range of outcomes.
It is, right?
So it really drives home how our mental conditioning can really shape our destiny,
Yeah.
for better or worse.
For better or for worse.
Yeah, it's a bit unsettling, to be honest.
It is a powerful concept to contemplate. But the good news is the Yoga Vasistha doesn't just leave us hanging with this idea of being at the mercy of our vasanas.
Okay, good.
It offers a path to liberation from this suffering. And that's where we'll pick up in the next part of our deep dive.
Okay, now you've really got me hooked. I can't wait to hear about this path to liberation and how we can break free from these limiting patterns. But for now, we'll have to leave our listeners on the edge of their seats and join us for part 2 as we delve deeper into the Yoga Vasistha's teachings on finding true freedom. Welcome back to our deep dive into the Yoga Vasistha. Before we left off, we were talking about Vasanas, these deeply ingrained patterns of thought and behavior, and how they can really shape our experiences, even lead to suffering.
Yeah, it's a powerful concept and one that the Yoga Vasistha definitely doesn't shy away from. But it also offers this path to liberation from this suffering.
Oh, yeah.
And that's where the idea of self-knowledge comes in.
So how does self-knowledge help us break free from these patterns?
Well, the Yoga Vasistha points us towards recognizing our true nature, recognizing our true self as pure consciousness.
Okay.
It emphasizes that we are not our thoughts. We're not our emotions. We're not even our experiences. Our true self is that awareness that witnesses it all untouched and unchanging.
Okay. Pure consciousness, distinct from this noisy mind. That's a pretty big idea. How do we actually access this awareness, this true self?
Well, the Yoga Vasistha recommends a few key practices, and meditation is a central one.
Okay.
It helps to quiet the mind, step back from that constant stream of thoughts, and simply observe.
So less mental clutter, more clarity.
Exactly.
Makes sense. What else?
Self-control is another big one.
Okay.
Not in a restrictive sense, but in terms of understanding our desires and not being ruled by them. Recognizing that fleeting pleasure can often lead to more lasting suffering.
So choosing actions that align with our highest good, even if they're not the easy or most immediately gratifying choice, that takes discipline.
It does, and it's a practice, not a destination.
Yeah.
Yoga Vasistha also stresses the importance of seeking the company of the wise, or satsanga.
Oh, okay.
Surrounding yourself with people who are further along on this path.
Yeah, it's like having experienced hikers guiding you through challenging terrain. It can make all the difference. Where do you find this company of the wise, though? Is it about joining a specific group, or is it more about cultivating a certain mindset?
It can be both. Sometimes it's about finding teachers or mentors. Other times it's about recognizing the wisdom that already exists around us in the people we encounter every day, even in books and teachings.
So it's about being open to learning and growing wherever that wisdom might come from.
Exactly. Now, there's a story in the Yoga Vasistha that beautifully illustrates the power of self-knowledge in these practices. It's the story of King Vaja and his wife Kudala.
Okay, I'm always up for a good story. Tell me more.
So Vaja, despite being a king, he's deeply troubled by these existential questions. He's seeking true fulfillment, lasting peace, a way out of suffering.
Okay.
And he decides to renounce his kingdom and retreat to the forest to meditate and seek wisdom.
Wow, talk about commitment. Leaving it all behind to find answers. What about Kudala? Does she join him on this quest?
Kudala is incredibly wise. She understands that her husband needs to go on this journey of self-discovery.
Okay.
She supports his decision and continues to rule the kingdom in his absence.
She sounds like a remarkable woman, leading with both wisdom and compassion. What happens when Vaja goes into the forest?
So after a long period of intense meditation, Vaja achieves this profound state of enlightenment.
Wow.
He realizes the illusory nature of the world and the truth of his own being.
So he finds the answers he was searching for.
He does. And Kudala, sensing that he's ready, goes to him in the forest. But she appears disguised as a wise sage.
A disguise, I sense a very meaningful conversation is about to happen.
You're right. Kudala, in her sage disguise, engages Vaja in this deep philosophical dialogue. She challenges his remaining attachments and helps him to fully grasp the implications of his realization.
It sounds like she's not just a supportive wife, but also a spiritual guide.
That's a great way to put it. And their conversation is full of insight. They talk about renouncing attachment, not just to possessions, but to our ideas of who we are, even to the concept of liberation itself.
Letting go of everything, even the desire for enlightenment. Isn't that just another form of attachment, though, if you're clinging to the idea of non-attachment?
That's a brilliant question, and one that gets to the heart of this teaching. It's about realizing that true freedom isn't a destination. It's a state of being. It's finding peace in the unconditioned state beyond striving and seeking, not grasping, but also not pushing away.
So it's more about a shift in perspective than achieving a specific goal.
You could say that. It's about recognizing what we already are. Pure awareness, not separate from the world, but intimately connected to it.
That's a powerful shift. I can see why the Yoga Vasistha has resonated with seekers for so long. It's not about escaping the world, but transforming our relationship to it.
Exactly. And to ourselves, it offers this incredibly holistic approach, weaving together philosophy, mythology, practical advice.
What's standing out to you most from these teachings?
What strikes me is how the text addresses these deep existential questions that we all grapple with. The nature of suffering, the illusion of separation, the paths to true freedom. And it does it in a way that's intellectually stimulating, but also emotionally resonant.
Yeah, and all through these captivating stories.
Oh, yeah.
The Yoga Vasistha is full of them. But before we get lost in another story, maybe we should move on to how all this applies to everyday life. We'll explore that in the final part of our deep dive.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the wisdom of the Yoga Vasistha. We've been exploring some pretty mind-bending ideas.
We have.
Maya, the power of the mind, the path to liberation.
Yeah.
And we ended last time talking about how self-knowledge combined with practices like meditation and self-control can help us break free from those limiting vasanas.
Right.
But it all sounds a bit abstract.
Yeah.
How do we actually apply these teachings to everyday life?
That's the question, isn't it?
Does it mean like renouncing the world, living as a hermit? Not at all. The Yoga Vasistha is very clear that liberation isn't about withdrawing from the world or pretending that we don't have desires.
Okay.
It's about living with wisdom and awareness right in the middle of all of life's experiences.
So not renouncing our responsibilities or pretending we don't have desires, but just approaching them from a different understanding.
Exactly. The text encourages us to act with intention and clarity, but without being attached to outcomes. It's about finding that balance between engagement and detachment.
That sounds easier said than done.
It is. It's a practice.
But I can see how that kind of mindset could lead to more peace, even when things get messy.
Absolutely.
And is that where the self-control piece comes in?
Yeah, the Yoga Vasistha reminds us that we have the power to choose how we respond to situations rather than simply reacting based on those ingrained patterns, those vasanas.
So pause that breath before letting our emotions run wild.
Yes.
Not suppressing them, but observing them,
Yeah.
understanding them,
Yeah.
and then choosing a wise course of action.
Exactly. It's about cultivating that inner observer, that witness consciousness we discussed earlier.
Right.
The more we can access that awareness, the less we're ruled by those fleeting desires and fears.
Now, the Yoga Vasistha also talks about seeking the company of the wise.
It does.
How does that fit into applying these teachings to daily life?
Well, surrounding ourselves with people who embody these principles can be incredibly helpful. They can offer guidance, inspiration, a living example of what it means to live with this wisdom and awareness.
I guess it's like having a walk and talking embodiment of the Yoga Vasistha's teachings right there with you.
Exactly.
A constant reminder.
And don't underestimate the power of simply reading and reflecting on these teachings regularly.
Right.
The more we immerse ourselves in this wisdom, the more it starts to permeate our lives.
Speaking of immersing ourselves, I'm curious about some of the other stories and teachings within the Yoga Vasistha that we haven't had time to discuss.
Oh, there are so many stories of courageous kings, wise sages, even shape-shifting demons. Each one offering a unique lesson or perspective on the nature of reality, the power of the mind, the path to liberation.
It's like a spiritual choose-your-own-adventure.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
And what's fascinating is how the Yoga Vasistha blends philosophy, mythology, psychology, practical advice. It's a truly holistic approach to spiritual growth.
One thing that's really stuck with me is this emphasis on the illusory nature of the world. It's not saying the world doesn't exist, but that our perception of it is always filtered through our minds or conditioning.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that understanding can be incredibly liberating. It helps us to detach from those rigid views or fixed ideas about how things should be. It opens us up to a wider perspective.
It's like suddenly realizing the world is much more fluid and dynamic than we usually perceive it to be.
Exactly. And if our minds are constantly creating and projecting, we have the power to shift those projections, to choose a more expansive and empowering way of seeing ourselves in the world.
That's an inspiring thought. It makes you wonder what kind of reality we could create individually and collectively if we could truly master our minds.
That's the ultimate invitation of the Yoga Vasistha, to awaken to our true nature as pure consciousness, to liberate ourselves from limiting beliefs, and to live with greater wisdom, compassion, and freedom.
It's a journey worth taking, and thankfully we have this ancient text as our guide. We've only scratched the surface of the Yoga Vasistha's wisdom in this deep dive.
There's so much more to explore and contemplate.
Absolutely. But for now, we've reached the end of our deep dive into the Yoga Vasistha. I hope this has sparked your curiosity and inspired you to explore this profound text further on your own.
Remember, the journey to liberation is an ongoing process, a continual unfolding of awareness. The teachings of the Yoga Vasistha can be a valuable companion along the way.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep seeking, keep questioning, and keep expanding your understanding of yourself and the world around you.